On this Tuesday night, the Canadian Armed Forces finally names a woman to be second in command. What her appointment signals.
And we're talking about a journey of culture change.
Royal reaction, the Queen responds to that tell-all interview. One pandemic, two different financial outcomes. Why some Canadians are thriving and others are barely surviving. A year of living and dying.
You see them today, tomorrow you come, they're gone.
Reflections from frontline workers.
You wake up from your sleep crying.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with two long-standing institutions shaken by accusations. In London, the Queen has now broken her silence, issuing a statement reacting to that interview with Harry and Meghan. We will get to that in just a moment, but first to Ottawa and another shake-up in the highest ranks of the Canadian military. Lieutenant General Frances Allen has been appointed Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, the first woman to get that job. She takes on the role at a time when the armed forces is in crisis. The behaviour of two top military leaders is under investigation, former Chief of the Defence Staff, General Jonathan Vance, and his successor, Admiral Art McDonald. And it's going to take much more than one woman to fix the military's deep-rooted problems. Mikael Couture has our top story tonight.
What is obvious is that those measures didn't go far enough and they haven't moved fast enough.
An admission from the Prime Minister that his government has fallen short on commitments to systemic changes in the military. Justin Trudeau says there's a troubling pattern of harassment and intimidation or even assault in Canadian institutions, not just in the military, but also the RCMP and Correctional Services Canada. And Trudeau is promising to do more.
Ensuring that we're putting in place independent mechanisms to put an end to these troubling allegations and this behaviour once and for all.
It could start with the appointment of the first female Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Frances Allen. Over her 38-year military career, she has held a number of leadership roles, most recently as Canada's military representative at the NATO Military Council. But none of those jobs came with the public profile and pressure of this one.
I do think that in this moment, it's wonderful to have a woman appointed in the role, because when we're talking about a journey of culture change, and having more women in leadership positions is incredibly important to raise their visibility within the organization.
Allen's appointment comes as the Globe and Mail reports the federal government is preparing to set up an independent body to investigate sexual misconduct, racism, and discrimination in the military. Trudeau wouldn't confirm that report, but it's believed the new body will be outside of the military chain of command, which opposition leader and military veteran Aaron O'Toole says is essential.
We had the last ombudsman report to the Minister of Defence, and he sat on the allegation for 3 years, and he let down the women wearing the uniform of their country.
Grilled about that in question period, the defense minister says he did the right thing by directing the former military ombudsman to the Privy Council office.
No politician should ever be part to conduct any type of investigation. Immediate allegations reported to the appropriate authorities.
Lieutenant General Allen's promotion comes as the military quietly demoted the former VCDS, Lieutenant General Mike Rouleau, to an advisory role. He'd only served as the military's second-in-command for 8 months. Global News can also confirm what CBC first reported, that the commander in charge of human resources in the Canadian Forces, Vice Admiral Hayden Edmondson, was himself investigated over allegations of inappropriate behavior with female subordinates in the 1990s. The military says he was never charged. Donna?
Mikael Couture in Ottawa. Thanks. The Queen responded today to that tell-all interview her grandson and his wife did with Oprah. Buckingham Palace issued a statement on behalf of Her Majesty. It is brief and to the point. The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan, it reads. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much-loved family members. Critics are jumping on that statement, that it took too long, that it casts doubt on the couple's claims about racism. The Queen has never done interviews, and for decades she has quietly endured multiple family dramas and tragedies. As Crystal Goomansingh reports, the palace is unlikely to be drawn into handling this one in public.
So how many grandchildren have you got?
I have three.
Three.
As people around the world talk about his family, Prince Charles focused on his royal duties, lavishing praise on healthcare workers and defense staff at a vaccination center.
I can only hope that eventually you'll have a chance to see your families again.
The royal family and its alleged mistreatment of Prince Harry and Meghan once again splashed across newspapers, online, and discussed in the streets.
Personally, I think she's not only having a pop at the royalty, she's having a pop at my country, and I don't like that.
Sadly, I don't think it's going to get better since the interview. I think people, you get trolls jumping on the bandwagon, and I think it might get worse.
The Queen says the claims made in the interview with Oprah will be dealt with privately by the family. Mark Borkowski is a publicity strategist.
And although front pages are formulating with the hype that this is the greatest crisis to hit the royal family, that's tosh. Diana was pretty major, but the abdication of Edward and where the whole question of monarchy was thrown into debate.
King Edward VIII gave up the throne for love. Prince Harry, who has spoken about feeling like he doesn't fit into the royal family, appears to be following a similar path. Even with millions around the globe having watched the interview, it's not clear if it will change any viewpoints. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Now to COVID-19 and two trends that we're tracking: the spread of those highly contagious variants and the rollout of vaccines. Across Canada, more than 2,300 variant cases have now been confirmed. One of the hardest hit provinces is Ontario, where about 30% of new cases are now due to variants. Canada's top doctor says the next few weeks will be critical in limiting the spread of the variants while more Canadians get vaccinated. And on that front, there is progress. More than 69,000 doses of vaccine have been administered today. Canadians who are fully vaccinated are still waiting for guidance on what they will be allowed to do. BC's top doctor says she expects something similar to the U.S., where new guidelines say fully vaccinated people are free to gather without masks in small groups.
And right now, we're not at that point where we have enough of the people who are at risk immunized that we can have overall guidance. But I think that's a very good example of what we can look forward to as more people are protected, particularly more of our seniors and elders in the coming months.
To try to get more seniors vaccinated faster, Quebec is going against federal advice. It has decided to offer the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine to people across all age groups, including those over 65. Heather Yurix-West explains the decision and how it compares to other provinces.
In Quebec, the race to protect its oldest and most vulnerable residents from COVID-19 is on. The province says it will use all vaccines available on this population, including the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
We have actually data from other countries too, even UK, and others are using it after 65.
Last month, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization recommended the AstraZeneca vaccine not be used on adults over the age of 65. Quebec is the first province to ignore those guidelines, basing their decision on emerging data from other countries that has not yet been peer-reviewed.
The information that we have about the AstraZeneca vaccine is that it is very effective at preventing deaths and hospitalizations.
Across the country, rollout plans for the AstraZeneca vaccine vary significantly. In order to get this vaccine in Manitoba, you need to be age 50 to 64 with a medical condition. But in Alberta, you have to be under 65 and healthy. Ontario, just between the age of 60 and 64. While BC has chosen to give the vaccine to essential workers who may be more likely to transmit the virus.
We are planning to use the initial shipment of the AstraZeneca vaccines to address our ongoing clusters in outbreaks that are leading to some of these rapidly increasing numbers in some places, some communities.
When vaccine is in limited supply, who you vaccinate is really important because we're trying to prevent hospitalization and death.
It's why ICU physician Dr. Michael Warner believes the AstraZeneca vaccine should be carefully triaged and given to those who need it most.
We should actually be taking the vaccines to those people, making sure the most vulnerable people who have health problems, high exposure risk, and then age get vaccinated.
Especially as some regions see COVID-19 numbers start to rise. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, Calgary.
There are questions being raised about a plan by some provinces to delay the time between the first and second vaccine doses by 4 months. About a dozen doctors, scientists, and immunologists from Ontario and Quebec have sent a joint letter to Canada's Chief Public Health Officer and provincial officials. Abigail Beeman is following this for us tonight. Abigail, what are their concerns?
Donna, a draft of the letter obtained by Global News says, quote, partial protection from a single dose extends vulnerability to infection by 13 weeks, specifically highlighting concerns around variants.
There is actually no science or evidence to support this decision.
To some degree, it is an experiment because we don't have hard clinical data.
Vaccine manufacturers call for a 3 or 4 week lag between doses, depending on which vaccine. Canada is stretching that period longer than other countries to 4 months. And the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, which made the recommendation, acknowledges no data exists for that period of time yet. In response to the letter, Canada's top doctor says real-world data constantly coming in shows efficacy is high after a 2-month stretch and isn't expected to decline fast.
Increasing the flexibility of the ability of the provinces to deliver that first dose, which is really safe and effective to as many people as possible to prevent deaths and hospitalizations, is paramount.
The letter calls for, at the very least, some mechanism to make sure the elderly and people in high-risk groups can get their second dose on the manufacturer's schedule. Ontario, for one, has said that will be the case for people in care homes, but at this point, no one else. Donna?
All right, Abigail Beeman in Ottawa, thank you. The financial impact of COVID-19 could take years to fully understand. What we do know is that not every Canadian was dealt the same hand. Mike Drolet takes a look at the uneven economic impact of the last year.
You could excuse Canadians for being dizzy from the year of COVID, in and out of lockdown, time and again. And while the health crisis unfolded, the economy took a beating.
Yeah, I think one thing, regardless of how you fared during COVID, it threw a stick of dynamite on everyone's finances.
But economic downturns are as unfair as they are devastating. For every Canadian who needed government assistance to make ends meet, another was socking away money they would normally have spent on luxuries like travel. Financial expert Kelly Keane has been speaking with both.
That camp over there that has some extra money, they're actually reaching out to me saying they're kind of embarrassed to even talk about it because they know so many people are suffering. And the people that are suffering are still dealing with that conversation of, tax times coming up. They may owe money.
Industry was no different. After months of losses, StatsCan reports retail numbers have rebounded, and real estate is breaking sales records every month. And restaurants continue to struggle, along with anything related to tourism and travel. Add it all up, and it's a confusing mess for new graduates.
There aren't as many jobs out there.
When Patty Facey graduated with a master's degree in information, she didn't expect anything to be handed to her, but she believed there would be more.
And if you are somebody that just was unlucky enough to graduate right now, you've kind of slipped through the cracks when it comes to government relief.
She's not wrong. 2020 grads didn't qualify for the CERB, nor did they get tax relief on tuition like current students. Instead, they received the far more frugal student benefit and no help on student loan payments.
People want to be productive. People just feel very disillusioned with the fact that we're, as a generation, so saddled with debt that maybe we can't have the same sort of economic participation as our parents did, buying homes or investing or saving for retirement.
Painting the Canadian financial picture has never been so confusing. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Another blow to journalism today. BuzzFeed, which bought HuffPost 3 weeks ago, is laying off 47 employees and has closed HuffPost Canada and HuffPost Quebec. Visitors to the site today saw this. As of March 9th, HuffPost Canada will no longer be publishing content. 23 journalists in Canada are out of work. BuzzFeed says it's part of a restructuring plan for the whole company. HuffPost Canada had filed for union certification in February. The union tweeted today, HuffPost Canada consistently punched above our weight and did vital, important journalism in Canada. It is a sad day for journalism. The case against the former police officer accused of murdering George Floyd coming up. Jury selection finally begins. This image is capturing lots of attention. A Catholic nun fell to her knees in front of soldiers in Myanmar and asked them to spare the children and shoot her instead. Two of the officers knelt with her, but behind her, others opened fire on protesters. Violent crackdowns against demonstrators have become a daily occurrence in Myanmar. More than 60 people have died since the military seized power in early February, including 2 people yesterday in the city where that nun pleaded for restraint. In Minneapolis, a jury is now being chosen for the trial of the former police officer accused of killing George Floyd. The courthouse is heavily fortified there with concrete barricades, fences, and barbed wire, and the Minnesota National Guard is patrolling the grounds. What happens inside is being closely watched. As Jackson Prosco reports, even choosing the jury is expected to take weeks.
You have been summoned as potential jurors in a trial where everyone has seen the key piece of evidence. Potential jurors were pressed on how they would decide the fate of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who knelt on the neck of George Floyd.
Do you think that might be a problem, absorbing everything and understanding all the evidence?
I understand, but the only I know what I see in the TV.
The trial will be live streamed. Jurors will remain anonymous and have already faced a lengthy questionnaire to weed out bias.
No matter what verdict comes out of this trial, we want it to be accepted by people on both sides.
Black Lives Matter! The death of Floyd touched off national protests and a reckoning over race and policing in America. In Minneapolis, Floyd's sister is in the courtroom on behalf of the family.
Be a man and take action and be responsible for what you did. Man up. You do the crime, you do the time.
Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Prosecutors are trying to add a third-degree murder charge to give the jury another pathway to convict.
All of the jurors in the case have to agree for there to be a binding verdict in the case.
Jury selection could take up to 3 weeks. The trial could span months. The outcome likely to further divide the U.S. Jackson Prosco, Global News.
Golden comeback ahead. The Canadian skiers seeing double.
You're watching Global National.
It has been an incredible week for Canadian skier Mikael Kingsbury. For the second time in 2 days, he has won gold at the World Freestyle Skiing Championships. Amazing stuff. The reigning Olympic champion from Quebec has now won 6 world titles and 11 world medals. And even more impressive, he only recently returned to competition after fracturing 2 vertebrae during a training run in December. Next, reflections from the front lines. There is no way to adequately describe the last year. None of us has lived through something like it. Humans, though, are remarkably resilient. And yet this pandemic has tested us physically, mentally, and spiritually in ways we still can't fully comprehend. Tonight we have reflections from those who confront life and death every day. Karen Lieberman has their stories.
Outside Downsview Long-Term Care Centre in North Toronto, the sun is shining. Spring is near, a season of hope. But it wasn't long ago. Inside, there was very little.
It was sad. It's a place I don't want to go back.
Plan is updated?
Yes, I will.
Personal support worker Belvon Thomas calls it a dark time, when a severe COVID-19 outbreak killed 63 residents and 1 staff member.
You see them today, tomorrow you come, they're gone. Some you will see have a little runny nose and a cough, and then you'll just see the face change, completely change.
Thinking back triggers a flood of emotions.
You wake up from your sleep crying. You can't barely drive home because you're crying.
When more than 100 staff members were out sick, someone needed to care for the residents.
It was like a war zone. Like, honestly, I don't know what got us through.
Beneath the shield, behind the mask, lies the trauma, the horror of what these frontline healthcare workers witnessed.
Everybody went out in a plastic bag. And people think like, oh, you're used to death. No, I'm not.
Down the street from Downsview Long-Term Care Centre at Humber River Hospital, each patient, each loss is etched in the minds of those who cared for them.
We had a young woman with 3 kids who, before she was intubated, we called the family so she can say goodbye to her kids.
There's no words. We cannot say anything. Like we just try to be there for them. The shoulder for them to cry on. That's the only thing we can do.
In the ICU, death by COVID can be slow, painful.
If you have seen a picture of somebody who is drowning in water, imagine. It's lack of oxygen, you're looking for oxygen, you see how distressed that person is going to look like.
A harrowing depiction that will forever haunt those on the front lines, when sometimes all they could do is be there.
You sing with them, you sing for them. I remember one resident, I sing Amazing Grace. How sweet thou art.
Forever, we're going to have this love and respect for each other because of how we just pulled through this together.
Survived it.
Yeah, it was
a dark time. Karen Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
Brighter times are ahead, we hope. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Buffalo Pound Provincial Park in southern Saskatchewan. Please email Your Canada to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.